Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. This week, there may be the perfect Civic. Kyle drives two very different fun cars. The Supra gets a V8, and Jeep has an answer for law enforcement. But first, a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, so we got a pretty packed show this week, so let's get right to it. The first thing we're going to discuss is a spin-off of your convertible, sporty, fun, somewhat affordable cars, whatever it was called. But this is focusing...
Affordable sports cars, because there was only one convertible.
And this is comparing the convertible two-seater to the hardtop four-seater, the rear-wheel drive to the front-wheel drive, the automatic to the manual. So very different approaches.
Yes. Yeah, we decided to spin out the Mini Cooper S versus the Mazda MX-5 Miata. I know it's a strange one because in the main comparison, we actually said people probably aren't cross-shopping the two. But it's more about how they approach the idea of fun and how one is a pretty classic take on driver fun. And the other is more of a take on day-to-day living fun and making being in a car more interesting. Because I think we can all admit it, being in the MX-5 while you're stuck in traffic or anything isn't really nice. I mean, it's fine, but it's a boring interior. And I mean, if you have the roof down, that's great because open air. But beyond that, it's not a really interesting cabin. Whereas the Minis is really cool. And it's still reasonably fun to drive as a turbocharged little hatchback. It's just that it's not nearly as pure and interesting as an MX-5.
And open air traffic's not always all it's cracked up to be if you're getting diesel trucks spewing on you.
True, yeah. But, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I haven't driven the new Mini. I really want to. The MX-5 is one of those cars that can be fun in trafficy commutes as long as you're still moving at times. But if you're just sitting there, then yeah, there's not much going for it. But I would wish the Mini still had a stick, but I get it. No one was buying them much anymore.
It wasn't even a good stick. Like that's the other thing. Like I know manual fanatics won't like to hear that. The Minis wasn't good. It was super long gears, and the throws were long and vague. I don't mind that it's gone, and I know we've talked about this before with the main comparison and stuff. My issue is that there's no paddle shifters.
Mm-hmm. Which is odd.
Yeah, very odd. I'm sure they'll be in the JCW, but you shouldn't have to go to the very top model just to get paddle shifters when something like, I don't know, like a Kia Sorento has paddle shifters now.
EVs, some of them even have paddle shifters. All right. Well, anyway, we'll move on.
Yeah.
So next is one of our freelancers, Canal, drove the new Honda Civic Hybrid Hatchback. And as I said, this may be the perfect Civic because you and I both prefer the hatchback of anything because it's just so much more practical. The hybrid isn't like no hybrids hardly anymore. The penalty hybrids of old, it actually makes more power than the gas engine, and it's a new one. So it's like, yeah, you get great gas mileage, power almost as much as the SI, not the same thrill, but
same power as the SI and then more torque.
Yeah,
but not delivered the same way.
Yeah, the numbers are the same, but when you add in weight and stuff, you're not gonna. I guess I should have said not this similar close acceleration or close get up and go. But yeah, so you get power, practicality, efficiency, and anyone who's driven the latest gen Civic, like it's just a fantastic car to begin with. So
there is only one. Well, I have two concerns about this. One, I very badly want to drive it, so that's not a concern. That's something I'm looking forward to. But my two concerns are that I I wish you could still get the hatchback with a manual without going to a Type R, because it was the previous Sport Touring was a really great car all-rounder that was still fun, and you still got more or less the vibe of an SI, just with a little less horsepower and maybe slightly less aggressive suspension. But of course, the other issue that's plagued the Civic this entire generation is it's probably expensive.
Oh yeah, for sure it'll be. But
Yeah,
still, if you want a Civic, this is the one to get, and it's going to be
yeah,
probably the most expensive. I mean, the manual thing I get, but you and like 6 people that bought it are probably
yeah.
sad it's gone.
I get it. I get
With
it.
the SI and the Type R and the SI being manual only, like it's unfortunate because I think the car would have been better served to just kill the SI and have the sport manual hatch and then go to the Type R.
You don't kill the SI. Uh, well, now this makes the SI and the Type R like some of the only models of cars on the market that are manual only, including the
Maybe the only.
WRX TR. But yeah, I don't know. It sounds like a very good, all-rounder car. I'm just I'm sad that unfortunately you probably have to pay a lot to do it, but it's the best car in its class probably at this point.
Well, I think we'll have to find that out by grabbing a new Prius and a Civic hybrid hatchback and seeing how they compare, because
Yeah.
they're going to be cross-shopped a lot. I know the
Yes.
Civic usually fights the Corolla, but there's no Corolla hatchback hybrid because there's a Prius, so it makes total sense. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
it will be interesting, but I insist that we take them on some entertaining roads because I think both of those cars can be pretty entertaining as well as being great every day, right? Like I think showing how they work sort of as everything will be a really fun comparison down the road.
They both look good too. It's just it's odd how close they are together.
Yeah, yeah, very strange.
So moving on to the Supra getting a V8, it's kind of not, well, it's true, but it's not. You're not going to be able to buy one. Yeah. Well, there'll be like 3, but
yeah,
you can't buy one. So Toyota's entering supercar in Australia, which is pretty cool because forever the Australian domestics were there, and it was like Ford versus Holden. And then at one point, Nissan was there for quite a while. They had the GTR when it first came out, the R32, and I think it got banned. I people who know motorsports will know better than me, but it was pretty fast. And then they came back about 10 years ago with the Ultima, which was just a V8 tube car with an Ultima body, but it was still pretty cool.
Yeah.
And Volvo was there for a while too, remember?
And I think Mercedes for a short time.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a bunch of very odd ones, and yeah.
And it's crazy because Australia's population is smaller than Canada. So you'd think to invest into a series like that, but it's an Australian series, but it's got a global audience. So I get it. The thing is, I don't know. I can't wait to see the Supra against the other cars, because in real life it's tiny, like a Supra and a Mustang. So I don't know if they're going to make it bigger or what, but
yeah. I haven't kept track of supercars in quite a while. Are they on a controlled chassis now?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so it'll be very strange to see how the Supra shape is stretched over all of that.
I mean, in fairness, do you remember the Supra NASCAR? Because I don't know what they call it now, but the second series, like the one below Cup, they ran the Supra, and it was like a Supra nose on a sedan. It looked so weird, but it's a stock template you have to follow.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean,
anyway, like I always say, any motorsport that has more OEM support is awesome because it always means better competition.
So, yeah, absolutely.
And with Daniel Ricciardo potentially losing his seat after this week, hey, there could be an opportunity.
I mean, I would watch him race a Supra V8.
Yeah. So moving on to something still Toyota but less exciting. The Highlander has been around for 25 years. That seems crazy when you think about it, but then you think of how 25 years ago isn't that long ago. It sounds long ago because when we grew up 25 years ago, it was like the 50s or the 60s in ancient time, but now it's like 2000.
Well, and I think cars from 2000 are still recognizably related to cars on the road today, whereas then, a 25-year-old car was a 75 car, and that felt like a whole lifetime of car development. calling this less exciting is a bit of an understatement. I mean, uh, look, the Highlander's fine, but let's be honest. Most people, not most, but a good chunk of people are no longer buying it because the Grand Highlander exists, and it fixes all the problems of this for very little additional money.
And then when you throw in Land Cruiser and 4Runner, that can kind of fill the void of someone who doesn't need that much space in a third row or a third row at all.
Yeah.
The Highlander's kind of stuck. Like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the sales may support it. Maybe it's a rental special now, but
I was looking that up because I noticed in the press release for this it said, oh, it's the number one retail selling SUV in its class for 8 years running. Yeah, it didn't include last year because the Grand Highlander showed up and sales dipped like 65,000 units for this in the US.
Oh wow!
Because why wouldn't
Grand Highlander makes more sense?
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, wow, it's a quarter century of a lifted Camry wagon.
Yeah, but to your point about the car difference, I remember because I'm a bit older, like being a kid teenager in the 90s. I always considered from 1980 to 2000, that 20 years, the way the cars changed was unbelievable. Like it was really in the early 90s when things started to change, when you stopped having these sheet metal boxes and whatnot, like everything was getting round and the inside actually like had some style that wasn't just gauges because you could start getting electronics and you're right. Like I drive a car from the 2000s and minus having no touchscreen, it's not that much different than cars today.
Yeah. So it's an impressive achievement, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's someone out there who's they've been waiting on purchasing a Highlander, and now this is the trim to do it, which is it's not even an exclusive color. It's a color that's available on other trims.
It's like a Corvette, right? You buy it, you put it in your garage, and you wait for the anniversary to go up in money.
Yeah.
So moving on to another story, I just included this because it's kind of funny because it relates to something that happened to me yesterday. So a place that I do a lot of my video shooting, and you've been there too, is also it's a big chunk of town land that just free use for what people want to do, and it's also a place where some police will like not rest but sit waiting for a call that on patrol. It's sort of in the middle of the territory. So a couple times I've run into the same guys. When I have cars, we talk about the cars. We were talking police cars yesterday, and we're saying how with the Charger dead, Chrysler, Mopar, Dodge, like they have nothing right now for the police because Ford has the, I think they still call it the Interceptor because it's not officially an Expedition. It's actually like a Taurus with a Expedition or a Taurus with an Explorer body on top, basically like an old Explorer, which I'm simplifying it, but it is different than even the Explorer we got before it went rear drive. And GM has their Yukons. Ford also has the F-150. But yeah, I mean, Dodge tried to put the Rams out for a bit. They probably still do, but they were saying like the Chargers and the Rams had problems, I guess, for how they needed to use them, which what?
They haven't just switched over to Hornets? Like, come on.
Everyone's in quadriphilios. So anyway, the Jeep's going to offer the Wagoneer L, and it's funny because I mentioned this to them yesterday. It's like, well, like what are they going to do? Because the Durango's days may be numbered too. So I actually said Grand Cherokee L, but this probably makes more sense because it's a truck underneath and it's more traditional body that you can just smash over curves and stuff. So we'll see how it takes off, because I know some, especially in the US, some counties, precincts, whatever, they're very loyal to certain brands because there's companies that sell vehicles and those companies maybe specialize in Chrysler. So
yeah,
the whole point of the story is if you see a all black Wagoneer suspiciously rolling beside you, just be careful. Yeah. L, it's got to be an L because you need that extra space.
Jeez, those things are enormous and pricey. That's a very expensive police vehicle.
Well, the officers I talked to yesterday said that the Taurus was useless because it wasn't big enough. And I was thinking, that's a big car, but with all their computers and gear and stuff. So they said like the Charger was big enough, but the V6s, because of all the weight they threw on it, like couldn't get out of their own way. And then the V8s were great, but they were pricey to keep running with fuel. And I've heard this before, people smashing them. So anyway. Anyway, that wraps up, I think. Yep, that wraps up our review of features, news, and reviews and comparisons and all that stuff. So we're going to take a quick break and come back with the question of the day. eBay Motors is here for the ride. With the parts you need at the prices you want, and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, they're guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Okay, so on to the question of the week, and it is based purely off of the last story we just talked about. And I know it's usually American cars that are police vehicles. There's been exceptions. I know some places had Foresters back in the day because of their capability. But for the most part, it's usually American because it's in America and they want to, support what's produced there. So
Makes sense.
Question of the day, though, is what non-American vehicles should have a police version available for police and fleet? And I mean, some of the answers could even be built in North America, so it would make even more sense.
Mm-hmm.
So since I came up with the question, I've got two answers, a very reasonable one and a more unreasonable one. So for the reasonable one, I know we always somehow end up back here, but I have Toyota. I think the Sequoia would be perfect because it's a body on frame SUV. It can come as hybrid, so you get to save some fuel. And I know the Explorer, Interceptor, whatever you want to call it, hybrids, like big push right now because of that. And even if you don't need something as rugged, like a Grand Highlander hybrid, or even maybe a Highlander, like even those, I mean, they're not maybe going to be rugged enough for the duty they need, but yeah, and a lot of those are built here, so you're still supporting American jobs.
Okay, yeah, that's so that actually kind of takes my one, because I was going to say Grand Highlander kind of makes sense. Sequoia also does, because also the terrible third row doesn't matter in a police pursuit vehicle.
Yeah.
So,
and like I said, the Yukon, and now there's the Wagoneer, and
yeah,
Ford does have the Expedition when you need more space. So yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I'll let you go because I don't want to accidentally steal your next one. I was just gonna say there's another Japanese brand that makes body on frame truck SUV.
Well, for now. Yeah.
Oh, hey, it's got a new engine.
No, what I mean is for now, I mean the trucks side.
Yeah.
But
your model's going nowhere.
So my first one is one that I'm actually a little surprised you didn't suggest. The Outback.
Oh, yeah.
The Outback would be a really good police vehicle. I mean, I know the UK uses a lot of Volvo wagons, and this feels in this similar vein, right? It's pretty quick. It's a wagon, so it should be spacious enough. Yeah,
it's jacked up too, so you can go over curves.
You can go over wherever.
Now, how I said like some Foresters, I remember two Legacies back in the day were used in, I can't remember the exact places, but basically places that have a lot of national parks, like maybe Colorado or Utah, because that was before Ford offered, like it was a Crown Vic or the Legacy. Like nowadays, everything's all-wheel drive and doesn't matter. But back then, I get it. So my crazier answer, because we're sticking with Japan here, is I wanted to think of something European. And I thought I had. Now, it's not going to be a pursuit vehicle, but it could be a patrol vehicle. It could be a special forces vehicle. The Mercedes Metris. It could be right around the right size. Keep the rear seats in, like the middle row and the front row, and you could ton of space in the back to throw stuff. And it'd be reasonably sized and reasonably quick enough. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what the pricing would be, but I could see it.
Yeah, no, I see that as a surveillance vehicle. That could be really useful. I'm going to also go with a German choice for my second, less reasonable choice. The ID Buzz.
Yeah, you know what? And that probably will be like, how departments lease vehicles and they wrap them and put lights on as like a promo thing or community thing. I totally see the Buzz being used by that in a lot of places. We don't even see one here in Ontario.
It seems like it'd be a really practical choice, right? Like tons of space, easy to get in and out of. You could store a lot of equipment in it. It would probably look pretty
huge.
Cool. Yeah. So I don't know. That's my pick.
This is very regional specific, but the Ontario police that patrol the whole province, they always wrap sort of the the coolest current vehicle, and it usually shows up at the Toronto Auto Show. So maybe we should make a bet that the ID Buzz will have lights in the wrap at the show this year.
Seems like a good idea.
All right, well, that wraps up our question of the week. If you have any suggestions, let us know. Comment, emails, whatever. We are going to take a longer break, and when I come back, I am going to talk to someone about a prestigious award. And Kyle didn't get to join us because he was in transit, but it's very, I think it's going to be very insightful. It should be good. Mm-hmm. So we'll see you then. This is the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Okay, everyone, let's take a minute and talk about the one that got away. The vehicle you once owned and for whatever reason had to get rid of, and to this day fully regret ever doing so. For me, it's my Subaru SVX. It was a 1997 model, which was one of the last years it was ever sold here. It was black on the outside and it had the beige leather and suede interior. It was in amazing condition for its age because it was just a one-owner vehicle. The interior was near flawless. The paint was pretty good considering it was about a 20-year-old car when I got it. I just loved everything about it. I loved the quirkiness because I love oddball cars. I love the window within the window, the power button on the gear shifter, the way the dash was laid out and you could hide the radio behind the fake wood panel. The flat six was just so smooth and it was all-wheel drive, and although it wasn't overly quick, it still had enough power. The problem was, within a year of buying that car, I ended up selling it because I got a great deal on another vehicle. And to this day, I regret doing so. Part of the reason I sold it was, although it was in great shape, it wasn't perfect and there were things that needed to be fixed, like the air conditioner, reservoir, some bearings, and other bits. And back then there was no eBay guaranteed fit program, so finding parts for such a rare 20-year-old car was not easy. Luckily, I sold it to someone who not only cared for it, but took the time to fix it up, and every once in a while I do get to still see it, and I still regret ever getting rid of it. I am constantly online looking for a new SVX because now I have a system that I can find parts for it, but I haven't come across one that's both in the right condition and the right price range. With over 122 million parts, you can make sure your number one ride or die stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Welcome back. This week we have a special guest that's a little different than usual. If you could just explain what you do and your name.
Yeah, sure. My name is Jeff Gilbert, and by day I am the auto reporter for WWJ, the all-news radio station in Detroit. But my volunteer job, and what you're probably wanting to talk about, is president of the jury for North American Car, Truck, and Utility Vehicle of the Year.
Yeah, so that's a big award. It's probably easily the most prestigious in North America. It has a name right in it. But explain
we
why
certainly think so.
Yeah, explain why it's such a big deal. Like what forms the jury, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Unlike other awards, for example, one of the best known and one of the most prestigious is Motor Trend Car, Truck, and Utility of the Year. That is done by the editorial staff at Motor Trend. In this case, we are 50 journalists, all from different publications, and we all look at vehicles differently. I mean, I tend to be sort of like a middle class, middle-aged guy. What kind of car do you want to buy? We've got gearheads who can take an engine apart and put it back together blindfolded, people who can do fast laps on the track, people who look at consumer issues, monetary issues. So we all come together. We initially we take the vehicles that are new or redesigned for the model year. Then we vote on them and we cut it down to about 25 vehicles in total. That's where we are right now. We will evaluate those vehicles, vote again, 3 finalists in each category, one more round of evaluations, one more vote, and then the winners will be announced to start the auto show here in Detroit in January.
Oh, that's excellent news. I was looking at the list of jurors, and a couple of my colleagues up here in Canada are on it. Ones I know really well, so you got some good choices there. So the 25 finals, like you said, are announced and they're out. I'm not going to name them all; it'll take too long. But you can go to the North American Car of the Year website. I'm part of two smaller organizations that are more regional. There's a Canadian one, and then I'm also in the Midwest. So it's very similar. So I understand, but this is all in North America. So it's a bigger scope, because to what you said about different interests in cars, it's also regionally different. Like someone here in
Yes.
Toronto can have very different priorities than someone in California, let's say. So that's
Well,
important too, that you have
it's
people.
interesting. I was in a briefing from Volkswagen, and their small SUV, the VW Taos, is the best-selling VW in Canada, but it's only number 4 in the US. So to me, that was kind of an eye-opener as to how two countries that seem very similar can have different tastes. And, as I'm talking to you, I'm maybe, 30 miles from Canada in my
Yeah.
suburb of Detroit.
Yeah, I actually lived in Windsor for 5 years when I went to school there. So, well used to crossing the border. Plus, that's where a lot of the events are. So, of these 25, are there any surprises that either maybe didn't make the list?
Yeah, one of the biggest surprises to me is for truck of the year, Ford's F-150 didn't make the list. That's a short list. It's only 5 vehicles. So it's a
Mhm.
Toyota Tacoma, Ford Ranger, Ram 1500, the electric Sierra from GMC, and the Rivian R1T. Again, it kind of surprised me because the F-150 is such, I mean, it's the number one seller in the US. But again, it was only kind of a mild facelift. So,
Mhm.
different jurors saw things differently, but it does kind of set up a nice head-to-head battle between the Tacoma and the Ford Ranger, and between a couple of EVs, the Sierra EV and the Rivian.
Yeah, it's the F-150 is number one up here too vehicle for a long time. So you do see them everywhere. These categories, like I understand having been in these systems, but some might not get, like, you get a cross section of vehicles, and it's not necessarily they're being competing against each other. It's how they stack up within their segment, correct?
Exactly, it's how they stack up within their segment. And again, jurors get a ballot,
Hmm.
and we're asked to choose at this point which vehicles we feel should be in consideration. So each one of us, all 50 jurors, select 10 cars, 10 SUVs, and 5 trucks. So the vehicles that get the most votes are the ones that make the cut. So we try to get a broadest consensus possible. And you know I, I found early on, I had a fascinating debate argument over 2 different vehicles with another juror one time. And that's when it hit me the diversity was important, because he thought this one vehicle was wonderful because it had beautiful design. I thought an opposing vehicle, which wasn't quite as pretty, had some great technology and more bang for the buck. So that's when it hit me. This is great. We all look at vehicles differently. So that actually to me is the strength of the award.
Yeah, I'm with you on the bang for the buck and the technology over the design, but I have colleagues and friends the same way, and you're right, it's
Yep.
important. If you get a bunch of like-minded people, then sort of what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And we don't officially debate the vehicles. Everybody votes individually, but between ourselves we do when we have
Mhm.
conversations. And everybody. That's the fun thing about cars in particular. Everybody looks at them differently. I mean, I'm sure you test drive a lot of different vehicles, and people walk up to you and go, "Oh, what's your favorite?" Well, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
have a. That's always the hardest question to ask, because I don't have a favorite. I'm looking forward to driving this for this reason, that for
Mhm.
that reason.
Yeah, with Kyle and I, who couldn't make it to this interview, we've discussed that before. And the other favorite question of what car should I get? It's like, well, can you give
Yeah.
me some sort of parameters as to
Yeah.
what you're looking at?
Oh,
Um,
buy a Mercedes S-Class.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, go get the new Hummer EV.
Yeah,
It'll great for downtown Detroit.
yeah.
So looking at this list, I've driven about half the vehicles, and there's a couple here that I think are strong in my opinion. But as I said, being on other awards like this, when the winners come out, they're not always the ones you pick, because it's a broad poll of people, and sometimes you're like, oh, really? Like that many people like that? So it's always interesting if you're
Yeah,
part of the system.
and I think the way that the founders of this came up with deciding the finalists and the winners was fascinating. We will each juror will have 25 points to allocate, and we can't give any one vehicle more than 10 points, and we cannot give any more than one vehicle 10 points. So I could do like 10, 9, and a
Mhm.
combination thereof. But it really makes us think about it. So it's not just like, hey, I love this vehicle and I want to push it as hard as I can. You've got to spread it out, at least in the first round. But the second round, we have 10 points, can give them any way we want. So that second round, I mean, there are some days between the three finalists, I go, yeah, I like this and I don't like the other two, and I give everybody 10. In other cases, it's like, well, I like this one a little more, but I kind of like the other one, so it's 6-4. Or, it really makes you be creative in how you decide. And that, to me, is what creates a consensus as opposed to just a straight vote. Hey, which one would you choose?
So, looking at the list, like I said, I've driven about half, and the other half, a lot of them aren't even available to regular media yet. So it must be a bit of a lot of, not a bit, a lot of work to try to plan to get your jurors in some of these newer vehicles.
Well, we have a drive event every year. So that event is the best way to get into vehicles that you've not been able to get into before. And quite honestly, sometimes a car maker isn't interested. I mean, there have been several times Tesla vehicles have been on there, and you know how Tesla is, and they've not made them available to us. Or other
Mhm.
times where routine car makers have made it hard for you to drive. So that unfortunately is just a part of the system that we can't fix. I'd love if everybody could get a week in every vehicle. But at least this 3-day event lets us look at most of the vehicles, drive them back to back, get a chance to drive in something that we haven't driven before. Sometimes, as you mentioned, there are some vehicles that aren't even out in the media yet. We'll get them and they'll bring them on an embargoed basis where, okay, you can drive them at this event, but don't report on it until the embargo lifts.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And you're right. Driving vehicles back to back in an event like that is so valuable because you have probably ideas of a car maybe you drove 7 months ago, and then when you get back in it, you're like, oh, it's different now than how I
Yeah.
thought it was.
Well, yeah, I
So
mean,
it
I
always,
usually go, yeah, I go into an event going, okay, what do I think the strong contenders are? I want to make sure I get into those. What vehicles, yeah, do I like this more? Do I like that more? What do I want to drive back to back? And, what is it? So, a couple of years ago when the mid-engine Corvette came out, it was so popular. We couldn't just check it out. Everybody had to sign out. You got your half hour, somebody else got the other half hour, etc. And that year it actually won, and that was the only chance any of us had to drive it was at that one event. So it varies vehicle by vehicle, and there are other vehicles that you sort of see sitting on the lot, and you can kind of think, well, maybe jurors aren't as interested in them.
yeah, yeah. It seems to be the way those sort of events go. I've been there where you're signing something and you're waiting and waiting for a key, and then there's
Yeah,
other automakers saying, "Hey, my cars are just sitting here. You can
yeah,
take them. I've already driven them
yeah,
twice."
right.
So is it always these three main categories
Yes,
for
it
the
started out
okay?
as car and truck, and then SUVs were a part of truck. And then I would say about 15 years ago, the people who were in charge decided that we needed to actually give utilities their own category. And it's been interesting how that category has defined. Now it's pretty much anything that's not a car or a truck. So a minivan might go into that category as well. Definitely a crossover. Then we get to a situation where one of the early years where we had three, the Lincoln Navigator won for Truck of the Year. And it's
Mm.
like, okay, was that a truck? Was that a utility? And later on, we kind of corrected it where, okay, a vehicle like that is going to be a utility. Because, sometimes we need more truck candidates because there aren't a bunch of pickups that were released in a given year.
Yeah, I can understand that. And looking at the list, I mean, I'm not going to call anyone out, but in car and truck, there's a couple, they're not going to really be real contenders, but the utility that's a strong field. That's going to be very interesting how that pans out. There's a lot there that could win.
There's a lot there that could win. And one of our jurors made an interesting suggestion during the vote that we're going to contemplate. I won't say we will definitely do that, okay, utilities are so popular. Do we want to go with 15 utilities and 5 cars and 5 trucks in the
Mhm.
future? So that's something we're going to talk about after this year's award and decide whether or not it's worth doing.
Yeah, I totally get the reasoning there because, like I said, some
Mhm.
of the cars they're new and they're cool, but they might sell in such small numbers. It's not going to probably win overall, but there's so many utilities. It seems like every
Yeah,
week there's something new being refreshed or introduced because that's where, yeah, like you said, that's where the popularity and the money is right now.
exactly. We have heavy debates over how new something is. Has this been refreshed enough to be considered? Is it, just a very mild facelift? I actually, when I became president, I surveyed the jurors and said, do you want us to just give you everything that's been redone over a new year to vote on? Or do you want us to do some editing and try to take out the mildest of mild facelifts? And overwhelmingly, they said they wanted us to do some editing and take out some of the mild facelifts. So we did that.
Yeah, like it's because it does. It gets overwhelming, and
it can
like,
be. Yeah.
They got a new radio or something. You're like, oh, it's not really new. But...
well, we'll debate a new trim, like the Hyundai Ioniq 5 was out a year or so ago, but the 5N is a very sporty version of it. Should it or shouldn't it, qualify this year? We decided it should. We put it on the ballot, and it ended up in the group.
It is a good vehicle, and I get the reasoning on that one, because that is such a change compared to the regular model. Like, it really is something different. But if they just said, here's a slightly bigger battery, then that doesn't really work.
Right. And we've had car makers say that to us before. Oh, this is all new. And we come and look at it and go, well, not really, not compared to that.
Yeah. It's easy when it's something like the Santa Fe that definitely looks new compared to something that you really got to start dig underneath the skin to see what's changed.
And we have a lot of debates. I mean, there are 5 board members, and we are constantly going back and forth on things, normally via email, because it's kind of hard for us to all meet in one place at one time, because we're all kind of busy because we do have day jobs. But we're constantly going back and forth, and we all have different views. So we take a vote, 5 to often it's 3-2, and we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. Is this is a democratic sort of you're voting, and the winner's the winner. You can't try to veto it or change, which is great, because that's what you're trying to do, is give consumers what everyone feels is the best.
Right, exactly. And the thought is, this is, you point out consumers, it is from a consumer standpoint. It's not necessarily the best car on the track or the, best built car. It is what we feel is the best car for consumer in terms of everything from technology to styling, but value takes a big part of it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something people should be aware of. A car that's 5 times the price of another one's obviously going to be better, but once you throw the price factor in, where does it really line up?
Right. And we have seen many times where a compact car has won the award. The Civic won it a couple of years ago, and it won it over, I believe, several luxury nameplates. So, there's a lot that goes into this.
Yeah, we just on a side, we also named the Civic the AutoGuide car of the year, because that new Civic was just so fantastic when it came out. I mean, it still is, but and now the hybrid's here on the list, so we'll see how that does.
Yeah, and that was another area of debate. Do we put the hybrid on the list because we just did the Civic? But a lot of us drove it, and it really does feel new. It's a different powertrain. The interior is a little more upscale, so we felt it was worth giving to the jury to decide, and jurors decided they wanted it to be one of the vehicles that'll be considered.
All right. Well, before I let you go, if you want to just remind the listeners and viewers the key dates that are coming up where this gets shrunk down.
Yep, exactly. Later in October, we'll be doing our drive event. That's not important to your listeners, but that's procedural. On November 21st at the LA Auto Show, we will be announcing the 3 finalists in each category. And on January 10th, because the Detroit Auto Show has now moved back to January 10th, we will go back to where we used to be before the Detroit show moved all over the place, to be the first event of preview days. That morning, January 10th, 2025, we'll announce the winners.
Well, we'll be at both shows as well, so maybe we'll try to get some time to talk about what are the 3 finalists in each category, and maybe ultimately the winners. So I look forward to those dates.
I would love to, and even if we don't, stop by and say hi.
Yeah, and anyone in Detroit, make sure you're listening to Jeff on the radio, and I'll make sure I do that. I'm going down next week, so I'll tune in.
Okay, terrific. Thanks.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's time for F1 talk. We have Colum Wood back on, and every week there seems to be a lot, and this week, once again, there's a lot that happened. First off, our predictions from last week, I don't think we could have predicted at all what happened in that last race. It possibly is the best race in like the last 5 years.
Yeah, it was pretty wild, right? But I have to say, like, during the race, one thing that really frustrated me, and this leads into our discussion, is that, after Piastri got by Leclerc, I just kept watching, like, him chase him down on the front straight, not get quite close enough, not get close enough, not get close enough. And I just thought, like, everyone's like, this is the best race. I'm like, it'd be the best race if Leclerc just threw one up the inside. But he continued to go on the outside. And I think it's because he realized he just didn't have the capability to close on him, right? So that's the controversy, right? These the big, the adjustable, flexible, whatever, holes in the rear wing on McLaren. So
yeah, well, we'll get to that in a sec. But you're right. And then once they got on the twisty parts, Piastri would pull away again. So it's not like it was just the wing that was putting him up there. It was just keeping him up there. But
yeah,
that race was the way it started on the weekend with Norris in 17th and both Red Bulls up there. And the way the race was playing out, where Perez was third and he had a good shot at second, maybe even the win. And Verstappen was
nowhere.
Just, he's struggling, but he's doing okay. Like, that was set up as, this is the race where Red Bull puts some distance on both championships from McLaren. Like, this is where they're going to, start to put the championship out of reach and the constructors back up ahead. And they threw it all away. And they ended up losing the constructors' points, and Max still lost points to Norris, who started in 17th. Like, I still don't think he's going to be passed, but it was just like, this was their big opportunity. Now, if Verstappen screws up and DNFs in a race, it could get interesting.
It could. Well, and it was crazy to see Perez, like, actually doing well for once, and then get, I feel like that was more of a science issue than a Perez issue, but I think one could argue potentially.
Yeah, and there's actually something I'll talk about with Perez. We'll cover that later. I fully agree. Sainz shouldn't have thrown it in on Leclerc. Like, once he made the pass, maybe it was just he had too much momentum, but he set that all up, and then it looked like he drifted. But it's funny, last night I was talking with some Ferrari friends, and they're like, it was all Perez's fault. So, it depends who you support, but I don't support either. And looking at it, it was like Sainz kind of put them in that situation when he didn't need to, and then he kind of moved over. And even in the reaction, Perez was like yelling at Sainz, and Sainz was like, what happened?
Yeah. Well, maybe he like legit didn't know he was there. That's always possible. But then that's also your fault to know if someone's there or not. So it's funny, like the Julian Palmer does his like analysis of stuff. And he was very much like, kind of like, maybe Perez, but probably just a racing incident. And it just sucked to see Perez finally doing well. It looked like he was going to get a podium. It looked for a little while like he could even do something bigger, right? Like if Leclerc and Piastri had gotten mixed up, it would have been, Checo sort of coming in for the win, but that was nowhere to be. So
yeah, I didn't think he's going to win, but at that point, it looked like second was his. He was just biding his time to make the pass, and then Sainz just dive bombs them both. Causes mayhem.
Yeah, I was actually confused at the end too. Like, I'm like, which one of the Ferraris is ahead? I was like, hold on. I thought it was actually, I thought for a split second that Sainz had actually gotten like all the way through and was in second, because that's what I think he was kind of waiting for. So
we'll move on in one sec, but my favorite part of that was when they show the drivers in the sort of the podium victory little box waiting to go out, and they're watching the replays, the reaction of all three of them, because none of them saw the crash, especially Piastri, because he was so far ahead, and Russell, because he was so far behind. They're like, oh man. Even Charles was like, oh man.
Yeah, it's like, didn't see that part of the race at all. So,
and then, you know what? I'm a Norris fan. If it had happened 3 laps earlier, even, I think Norris would have won the race, because he could have pitted, got tires, and according to the team orders, he probably would have, like, Piastri would have let him pass, and he was definitely faster than everyone around him. It's just he couldn't make the ground.
No, yeah, and he was coming the whole race. Like, he made up a ton of spots. He like, for, sucks where he started, but he made the very best of that situation, I think. So
yeah, if he's 5th with fresh tires at they crashed out. So if he's 4th with fresh tires at the restart, I think he's anyway. What could have been? So since we're talking a lot about McLaren, there was just a little controversy this week.
So it seems like, it's funny. What I thought was fascinating, as I started seeing it on Twitter, was these people posting these videos of basically the rear wing sort of flexing so that the bottom opened up a little bit and the air went through, right? So it seems like obviously all the teams picked up on this. I'm always I don't buy anything as truly organic, and that could have been, Red Bull paying people to post that stuff on Twitter and get a groundswell of opinion. Yeah. Who knows, right? But basically that happened. It looked like a legitimate issue, and so at first nothing was happening, but apparently as of this morning when we're recording, there's an article in Auto Motor and Sport in Germany that says that the FIA has actually asked McLaren to alter their wing so that it doesn't do this anymore. So apparently it's kind of irrelevant for this race anyway, because it's that they use different wings for different races. So it was, Christian Horner had apparently argued that it was used in the past couple races, but like they won't use it for Singapore. I'm trying to think. There's a couple other races. Yeah, Austin and Mexico are all races where they would use higher downforce wings. So it wouldn't come in until I think like Vegas. So
yeah, Vegas you'd want it for sure.
Yeah, so that's a long ways away, but apparently we'll wait and see then. But apparently it's been sort of shuffled off, and the rumor, the story in Auto Motor and Sport is arguing that Red Bull were actually pushing for like penalty points as an actual breach.
Of course they are.
Like, that's they're trying to, you got to win. You got to argue everything, play the political game. So
yeah, that team, there's no team out there that will try to pick a team for cheating this and that, and yet when they're winning, you're like, we're doing nothing wrong. It's like they all cheat. Exactly. And the thing is, McLaren wasn't cheating. FIA even said like the win was perfectly legal, but they also hold the right to ask teams to alter things whenever they want if they think they're in the gray area too much. That's what they did. Like there's no way they're going to lose points because FIA approved it. It's just in hindsight they're like, you know what, you shouldn't be doing that. Same with like this Red Bull brake thing that we all figured mysteriously disappeared. They weren't going to penalize them, but it was sort of a take that out.
Yeah, they exploited a loophole, which is what you're supposed to do, right? So the article I was reading was saying that basically that Red Bull anticipates, or sort of they believe that sort of trick probably was like 1 to 2 seconds a lap. Sorry, not 1 to 2 seconds a lap. 1/10
1 to 2 a race.
1/10 to 2/10 per lap. But the funny thing is, so this is weird. It points out that the speed differential, I guess is what they're saying, is that the speed differential between having DRS open versus closed is like roughly like 20 kilometers an hour on most cars, but it was only 12 on the McLaren. So that sort of indicates there was like an 8 kilometer an hour difference that they were able to sort of exploit. And I think maybe that made, like I said, all the difference to Leclerc not being able to sort of get close enough to throwing up the inside. So
yeah, like I said, Piastri and Norris were still outrunning everyone on the twisty parts. It was just on the straights they could potentially have stayed enough ahead. Like I still think Piastri would have won. And someone did the math. They said all things equal, the advantage they might have got, Piastri was still far enough ahead from Leclerc at the end. Before the caution, it wouldn't have mattered. But like you said, would he have been able to get a pass? And then that would have really changed things.
Well, and that's the critical thing, is because if you're Leclerc and you get past early on like you did, and then you're stuck trying to fight in the dirty air, you're wearing out your front tires more. And then by the end of the race, his tires were shot. So there's a real penalty to being second and trying to fight in that spot versus, you're up front, you got clean air, and clean air is king, right? It's a great thing to have.
I'm surprised it wasn't the Ferraris that pushed this more, because they are the top speed car right now. I mean, look at Monza, like they just ran away with it. So I could see why they were like, well, why can't we do this? But like you said, the next many races are tighter circuits, and that seems to be where McLaren's shining. So I don't think it's going to make much difference. It'll be Vegas. That'll be the difference. But we'll get to your other story before I have something that all relates to that.
Ooh, what's going on?
Well, we'll do the other story first.
Oh, my other story first. Okay, great. So the other story was Ricciardo. Oh, poor Daniel Ricciardo, right? Oh my goodness.
Rick.
So the rumor going into the Singapore weekend, which we're now done with, but the rumor was that he had already raced his last race. So that's not true. He is racing in Singapore, but there's a strong indication that he's no more after this. So unless even he admitted somewhere in an interview that, if he gets on a podium, he'll be king of the world and everyone will love him again. But, it looks like it's probably over. And there was I don't know where I saw this, some rumor that apparently Liam Lawson has a contract with Red Bull that stipulates that he has to be in like 5 races this year. I'm like, that's a weird stipulation. So I don't know where that info comes from, but I think it looks like, I mean, Ricardo's been given all the chances in the world, right? Like,
He's getting older too.
He is. Nobody else has had that much, leeway to try and try again and all that stuff and come back to the team. And like they gave him every opportunity and he hasn't shown it. So what are you going to do, right? I think maybe he'll go into marketing. He should go to NASCAR or something. And he loves America. So
it's funny you say that, because some people were saying, he should go to Indy like Groshans did. And I mean, that could be a natural change. And NASCAR is very hard to learn. It's very different racing. People think it's just ovals and this and that, but like anyone who's done it or anyone that's really into motorsports say like it's a whole different thing, because it's not about driving your fastest most of the time.
Yeah.
It's like all sorts of different strategies and the draft and whatnot. I was saying he should maybe go to Supercars, go back home, but a friend of mine that lives down there said he's not very popular in that region of the world, surprisingly. Yeah, they said I guess he's rubbed people the wrong way. Like they love Piastri and they love Lawson, but yeah,
maybe he's too cool for school in Australia or something. I don't know, but yeah, I feel like he's too big of a star to go back to Australia. Like, sorry, Australians, if I offended anybody. But I think like you got to go big or go home. He's got to either Europe or be in America. I feel like he could be. NASCAR would be fun. Like the other guys have done IndyCar, and it just seems so, I don't know, obvious. I mean, I guess you could do like endurance racing and stuff like that too. But I gotta like he'd be what a personality. And especially with who's the NASCAR? Is it Shane Van Gisbergen? Is he an Aussie or is he?
Yeah.
He's not from New Zealand.
He's in New Zealand, I think.
Okay. So he could, just the takeover of NASCAR by the Southern Hemisphere. We'll see.
I could see the endurance racing too, because that's a big deal. But he needs to be on a big stage. I mean, Supercars is big. Like, imagine if Toyota said, "Hey, we got the Supra coming in. You be our driver." But
that'd be cool. Yeah.
So
what's your surprise?
Well, not a surprise. I mean, it was making rumors earlier this week. I don't know if you saw it. It was actually right after the race. So Horner admitted that the car has problems, and he said they've historically looked back at the data, and it started in Barcelona in 23 when they made some change, and that's the exact time when Perez started really struggling compared to Max. And he basically said, well, Max was still winning, so we didn't care. And he basically, in so many words, said we just ignored Perez because Max was winning and there was nothing wrong with the car. Now that Max is struggling, oh wait, there has been something wrong with this car this whole time. Perez, I feel like what the hell.
Yeah, well, in case it wasn't obvious, he was a number 2 driver. He's like a number 8 driver. They're like, we don't even care anymore. But I think you're right, and that was an interesting article to hear that they've actually. It's funny. They say they think they figured it out, but then you need to actually switch it. So that doesn't happen overnight, I don't think. So they've been testing different floors the past couple of races, etc.
Yeah.
I don't have I mean, Red Bull did, wasn't it last year in Singapore? They did atrocious. It was the only race like that Max didn't win or Red Bull didn't win, right? And they didn't even come close. They were abysmal. And Max like qualified 10th or something. And so I'd be surprised if Red Bull did anything decent here. If Max got on the podium, I think that'd be probably just a good news for Red Bull. They just gotta keep Lando out of the points. That's the game.
Yeah, I think they had that moment, and Aston had it last year where. I can't remember what race it was, but they realized everything they'd done that year made their car slower. Because remember, they started off strong and they ripped everything off, and suddenly they were, not fighting for the lead, but back in the points. So I think that's Red Bull. If they strip it back to what it was in Barcelona, they'll be up near the front, but everyone else has advanced so much. It's not you're suddenly the best car, but
exactly, you're the best car from the start of the year, and when the McLarens are a second a lap faster than they were at the start of the year. That doesn't, it's not a great spot to be in. So, and I suspect there's a lot of like internal politics too around like, do you think Adrian Newey is really helping them out with stuff anymore? It's all his design, and he's probably like they're probably cutting him out internally of conversations already because they don't want him involved. And so, usually these guys are gone for longer, what they call the gardening leave, right? Like they're usually gone for longer, but he's going to hop right to Aston Martin, and I suspect these sort of the blackout period with him, he's starting to get the cold shoulder inside Red Bull.
Oh, for sure. But they also might be like, we need his help. And next year,
they do.
Who's going to want to invest that much into the car with the changes coming? So like McLaren, Ferrari, and even Mercedes, like you're kind of in a good spot because you've already got a good starting point. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to go crazy over a 1-year car. But with back to the Perez thing, so you hear that from your boss, and then you get in the accident, which maybe his fault, maybe not. I say more so not. And then he basically throws you under the bus again, saying how it's unsustainable that you don't get points and they're going to review his contract. So I know we've been joking like he wouldn't be there next year just due to his performance, but it seems like that relationship's getting real toxic real fast. So I don't imagine him there next year at all. Maybe he'll, I don't know, there's no open seats. Maybe it's not going to Mercedes, that's for sure.
Yeah, I guess Sonota might finally get the move up, right? And there'll be lots of. That's true. Yeah, we're already looking like a whole extra year ahead here. We just need to worry about right now, and there's still 2 seats left. But yeah, it's always exciting, and if there's only 20 seats, best drivers in the world. Let's see who gets them.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm sure lots going to happen this weekend that we will have missed by the time this goes live, but we'll catch up on it next week.
Sounds great.
All right. We'll see you then.
See you, Mike.
So that was an interesting conversation. This week it's not going to make or break the F1 season, but it's going to be interesting. It could really sway things one way or another. The practice that we've been able to watch is McLaren and Ferrari by quite a bit right now. So those of you listening will already know what have happened on Sunday, but as far as we know right now, we don't know. So next week, it's odd. I think I'm going on a trip and you're staying in town.
I am doing a local trip. But yes, I get to stay home, which is good because October is basically Kyle is always on the move. So you are doing a vehicle I'm very curious about.
Yeah, me too. So I'm going to Detroit to drive the Kicks. There'll be a full video and review on that. Same thing. I'm looking forward to it. I actually never drove the old Kicks. It just was it was too old by the time I was full-time reviewing again. So there's no reason to, but the new styling, the new updates, I'm very intrigued. So that will be up hopefully by the end of next week. And then you're going to, like you said, a 1-day drive that's 5 minutes from my house. So I'm leaving town and you're coming right by my house.
Yes.
Doesn't really makes sense.
Yes, I am driving the facelifted Ford Explorer. And then I will also be seeing a mystery vehicle that we can talk about in a few weeks. But yeah, it should be interesting. Yeah, the return of the Edsel.
Pinto EV.
Yeah. No, I'm curious because there are aspects of the Explorer I like, the pre-facelift, and aspects I really don't. And I've seen a few of these new facelifted ones out there and they look good. So it'll be nice, and it's also nice to do something that's pretty local and I can go home after half a day.
Exactly.
So yeah, and then Mike, what are we driving for our week-long testers next week?
Yeah, so next week's a week of not a serious comparison or an in-depth review. The Jag 5-liter supercharged V8 that was also a Land Rover one. It's pretty much done. It's out of the Range Rover Land Rover products, and we're saying goodbye to it because the Jaguar F-Type and the F-Pace SVR will be no more after this year, along with that engine. So it was a fantastic engine when it came out. It's still a good engine, but a lot of things caught up to it. And it's funny because it used to be the one you'd be like, well, you're not like this engine. And then some of the more modern turbo engines are like, well, yeah, those are better, but not much sounds like this engine, especially the Jag or the F-Type.
No, and the thing is I mean, it uses the same 8-speed auto as all the Germans. So on that sense, it doesn't have a disadvantage there. It's just it's thirsty and it doesn't have as much power as some of the turbo V8s. But yeah, like you said, the soundtrack is very unique. So it'll be a fun little bittersweet farewell, I imagine. It'll be interesting to have them together because I don't think we've ever done that. And then I will be driving, in addition to that, because it's almost the end of summer, I'm going to be driving the new 2025 BMW M4 convertible because, you know, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm warming to the idea of an M4 convertible. It's very, very heavy, but the new M4 is already kind of a bigger mini Grand Tour. It's
Looking
closer
at
to
it.
like what's that?
You're looking at it at the wrong perspective. Compared to the M5, it's very light.
Well, yeah, but how I remember an M4 driving, especially with the all-wheel drive, is it basically drives like a shrunken down 8 Series. It's very Grand Tourer-y now. So I don't know. It'll be. I'll see how the facelift has improved it.
All right. Well, we look forward to getting some insight on that, and we'll be back next week with more guests and more news. So until then, you've been listening to the Auto Guide Show, brought to you by eBay Motors. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
So long, everyone.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.